Hey all, welcome to Skeptic Hangout, the place where we sit back, relax, and chat about intriguing and sometimes controversial topics through the lens of skepticism. With us today is Richard Gilliver from the Skeptic Takeout, Laura McGee from Unapologetically Me, and Richard Gill from the Yorkshire Atheist. As I go on and on and on during this introduction, I am leaving you plenty of time to hit that like and subscribe button. So if you haven't already, please do so. Today's topic is superstition. So grab your English tea or your peppermint hot chocolate, get out your lucky socks and cover those mirrors, and join us as we discuss black cats and the 13th floor, which is still the 13th floor, even if you call it the 14th.
Touche.
This is episode 31, Superstition.
This is slightly unrelated. However, I've been meaning to say this for the past few episodes, and it might lead off into something in this episode. I put a poll up a good few weeks ago about with like different options like God, ghosts, aliens visiting Earth, blah blah blah.
All the things that people believe in.
The shebang. The things that people believe in. And I was really interested in the results of that because only one person who responded to the poll put multiple responses. And
Do
I'm
people
really
even know if
interested.
multiple responses are available though? Like some people might not check.
No, but the poll was: do you believe in these things?
The following
Ghosts, gods,
things.
blah blah blah
Yeah.
blah. And most people just put one or the other.
Hmm.
And I thought to myself, that intrigued me because it's amazing how people compartmentalize bad thinking, and I'm going to call it out for what it is. Bad thinking in one area, but don't accept it in another. It's like there's a huge cognitive dissonance going off somewhere. And it just intrigued me. It intrigued me why that was, why so many people who responded to that only put one option, whereas there was only one respondent who like believed a lot of shit rather than just some shit.
Yeah, that's sort of interesting to me. Like, I guess I have two questions immediately upon hearing that. Like, the first question is, did people realize that you could choose more than one option? Because maybe it was like,
I think so. Yeah, I think it was pretty obvious.
Pretty obvious. I don't know. I can be daft sometimes and take things like so basic that like, hey, which of these things do you believe in? And it's like, okay, well, more than one of these, but I believe in that one the most passionately, so I'll just mark that one. And not even realize that you can choose more than one. Then the other thing is, there is sort of this tendency to think that you're skeptical or think that you don't hold any bad beliefs, and so the one thing that you do believe in, you find completely, totally reasonable, and you find the rest to be complete bullshit. And I've heard people say that, like, I've heard religious people say, like, have you heard that religious argument? That's ridiculous, right? And then, but people will look at your same arguments and think that your arguments are ridiculous, right? So it's kind of weird how people are able to justify certain beliefs thinking that they're completely reasonable, but then look at other beliefs and say that's whack.
Yeah, on that point, I saw just by chance, it was just an advert on Facebook. It wasn't anything I was particularly interested in. It was just a magician doing some tricks on a video advertising his website or whatever. And I wasn't really taking any notice. It was just playing as I was looking at something else. I think he had different clips of him performing different tricks. And one of the tricks was him sat in a library and like doing this sort of thing with his hands, and I think it was a straw or whatever he was going to drink from came up into his hand. Wasn't that I was interested in? It was the lady in the background who saw it happen. And she saw it happen, looked at him, went and scurried away. And that I just found that fascinating. She wasn't even anything to do with the video. Really. She was just a woman in the background of this guy advertising his channel.
And so
If only one of
for
the
those not watching the
chicks.
video, he crossed himself. So she did
I
like
did,
the
sorry.
the Catholic cross. Yeah. Like
Yeah.
as though she's kind of like what do you call it? Protecting
Warding,
herself from
yeah,
warding. Thank you. That was the word I was looking for.
Warding,
Warding away
yeah.
evil. Yeah.
Yeah, I should have remembered that we're not just a visual medium.
No, but that's kind of interesting. Because a lot of people who do hold, I say a lot, it's so arbitrary. It's like the people that I talk to or that I'm exposed to, which could be a very, very, very small amount. A lot of the people in my life that are religious will also just dismiss a lot of that stuff as like trickery and silliness and stuff like that. And they won't think of it as being anything like, say, demonic or evil um, or otherworldly. But then you do have those religious people who also still hold to those beliefs that, oh, if I see somebody doing something like that, rather than there being a natural explanation, it's got to be like the work of the devil.
Superstitions, I think, are really interesting because I think lots of them can actually have really good, like there's the superstition about it's unlucky to walk underneath a ladder, for example.
I
It's
mean,
also,
it could be unsafe.
yeah, I mean, it's also like a good idea to not walk under a ladder because there might be someone up there with a bucket that's going to fall down and the ladder might slip. There are practical reasons why that's maybe not, walk around the ladder, probably safer for everybody. But then there are also superstitions which are based on like religious ideas or the fact that when someone sneezes we say bless you. Really, when you think about it, that's come from superstition about what sneezes are and what they mean religiously in terms of demons or whatever else. That's then just become part and parcel of how we treat people who sneeze.
And then it becomes cultural to the point where there is no meaning behind it. We just do it blindly. So a lot of the people that, I mean, maybe originally they were superstitious in thinking that there's like a demon or evil spirit and you're what is the word? Exercising it from your body or whatever through the sneeze. But nowadays, though, when people say bless you, they say it without even thinking because they're just so used to hearing it. Like even atheists will say bless you.
Yeah.
Which I find interesting for a different reason. Because like you burp or you fart and you say, excuse me, or even cough, right? But you sneeze and it's the other person's responsibility to say something. Like it's just kind of bizarre to me. So when I sneeze, I always say, excuse me, like, oh, excuse me.
Wasn't Ringa Roses or Ringa Roses or whatever the official title is originally something to do with the Black Death, warding off?
Yeah, it was something about. Well, I mean, there's lots of horrible things about nursery rhymes and stuff, but but again, those sorts of superstitions come from legitimate concerns and worries that people had because of like don't walk in front of a black cat and the whole significance with black cats and witches and that sort of thing. And I don't know the necessary origins of that. But again, things like that persist despite the religious reasons behind them, like we said, not necessarily still existing.
It's like,
sorry, go on.
No, I was just gonna agree with you and just say that it's like passed on over the generations, but it loses sort of its like initial meaning.
Yeah, and I think like superstitions in a lot of ways are taught, aren't they? There's no reason why people would inherently distrust the number 13 inherently if they hadn't had access to a history of humanity in various parts of the world that do distrust that number. And it still baffles me nowadays how you still get rows of houses that are built in 2021 where there's no number 13 and there's one. It baffles me that that's still a thing because rationally you can think, well, there's nothing behind that.
Is that a thing in the US as well, Laura?
Oh yeah, yeah, like the Friday the 13th and just anything that's like 13 is considered unlucky. The 13th floor is considered like dangerous or whatever. I think a lot of that is largely watered down now or gone, but I've heard of like big cities, for example, instead of putting like the 14th floor as the 13th floor, like you're not fooling anybody. What they'll do is they'll put like equipment or storage or something on the 13th floor, and they won't have it open to say like guests or the public because not necessarily because they think that the 13th floor is unlucky, but because they're sort of respecting that superstition that other people might still have. Right. So, oh, well, we just won't have any reason for a customer to go to the 13th floor and then we won't have any like bitching to worry about,
It wasn't. Isn't it a statistical? I don't want to say fact, but I'm going to say a fact because I can't think of a better word. Isn't it a statistical fact that people stay less in hotel rooms that with the number 13 than other rooms? The least booked of all the rooms.
I have no idea. That'd be great to look into because I've
I'm
never.
sure I've heard that.
I typically like get my hotel key card and I go to my room, and I've never had a hotel. I don't think I've ever stayed in a hotel where the first floor didn't start with the hundreds, right? It's like
Right.
if you're on the first floor, it's like 101, 102, 103. And so I don't know. Yeah, that's interesting.
Just a little point on that fact. I could be entirely wrong. I'm sure I've heard
I
it.
think if you've got the option, always book room 13 because the bed won't have been slept in as much. It'll be much spinnier. The pillows will be
yeah.
Or it's dustier because no one ever goes in there. The last time
that's why
cleaned it
you're
was
the
6 months
teacher
ago.
and we're not.
clean it and
So we've all gone from talking together to none of us talking at all.
I know, yeah, it's like
damn
awkward
good
silence.
podcast.
Yeah, that's professionalism right there, people. Yeah, so I guess for me, when I think about superstitions, I think about like what are the different kinds of superstitions, and it's really hard for me to wrap my mind around the fact that people legitimately believe in them, but I think they really, really do. So there's like some superstitions that are so basic, like I'm gonna wear this pair of socks to the football game because that's the pair of socks I was wearing when I won the other game, and now they're my lucky socks or whatever. That sounds so freaking ridiculous to people who don't hold that belief, but there are actually people who really embrace that concept of like, this is my lucky this, or I have to do things a specific way or else that.
and that appears to be quite prevalent in like with sports people, doesn't it? Like, you know, specifically wearing a certain thing or doing a certain ritual before a game or things like that. And it's because it's that whole thing I think we've talked about before about humans being pattern seeing creatures. We see patterns, and you know, this was the thing that led to victory, not the hours and hours I've spent training in this an athletic event or whatever it was specifically. You know, that raggy pair of boxer shorts that I've had for 8.5 years that did the trick.
Yeah, and I think
I came across that a lot when I was wrestling. A lot, whether it was someone putting the left shoe on first because they were always fared better. They always felt they had a better match when they'd put the left shoe on first for some reason, or people, you know, with religious symbol, having a little prayer, whatever, before they went out to perform.
And this is where I think superstition and psychology really have some interesting overlaps, because there's actually some truth to that when, like, so if you do a routine and it puts you in a certain mindset, and that certain mindset makes you more successful at whatever it is you're doing, it calms you down or it amps you up or it gets you like your head focused or in the game or whatever, or it gets you into that like positive, I'm going to win sort of realm, then it actually becomes sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy where there may be nothing mystical or magical to that superstition, but because your brain then falls into a certain like performance pattern, you actually can do better. So it's sort of interesting to me, to the point where I would say, hey, if that works for someone and they're more successful, do it, right? Because placebo is a real thing. Like our mind's ability to change based on like suggestion is outrageous.
I've got to push back. I can't sit here and let you tell people to trick themselves into people believing bullshit because it works for them. I've got to push back on that.
Go for it. That's cool. I'm saying it doesn't bother me. Like if you want to say like I'm gonna wear these lucky socks and you actually perform better, I'm not gonna say, oh, don't worry, that superstition is real. But I'm gonna say like,
but
I don't even think
they apply that to other areas of the life, and the scammer man comes round, and because they're prone to bad thinking, then they fall for the scam and they lose $100,000.
That's right. All of what I've just been sort of sat back for a while.
Yeah.
But like, I kind of understand what you mean, Laura, in terms of, because I don't think explaining to someone, actually, every time you go out and you, I don't know, tap the top of the garden wall before you go to a business meeting in order to give yourself luck and that gets you into a positive mindset. I don't think it's as effective to just say, well, just decide to be in that positive mindset instead, because it wasn't that thing that was actually getting you into the positive mindset. It was just a placebo effect from having done that in the first place, convincing yourself. But I don't think there's necessarily a replacement for doing that, which would have the same outcomes. But then I also understand, Jill, of what you're saying in terms of as a methodology or as a sort of way of getting to something, it's fundamentally flawed as well, isn't it? You know, in terms of the way of thinking about it. So I've just summed up what you've both said and not contributed anything to the conversation.
Actually, what you've contributed is being able to agree and see the strengths in both of our arguments without necessarily tearing down either, right? And I think what I would say is something like, for example, okay, so let's say the power of prayer, right? And then a person has like a headache and they like pray away their headache. God, please remove this headache from me. And I can slip into the same sort of meditative state when I get a migraine where I'm like, okay, this really freaking sucks. And so I'm going to get in sort of a meditative state that kind of allows me to kind of push the pain away or will the pain away, right? Both processes result in the same relief of the pain. But one, you're right, like Gilliver, there is that danger of the thought process being flawed. So then they go and they pray for something else and say it doesn't work out, or they pray instead of taking action on something. Then yeah, there's like this sort of
or pray instead of taking medicine.
Or instead of taking medicine, right? Yeah. So like me with my migraines, you bet your ass I put some chemicals in my body. I get some like ibuprofen or acetaminophen into my blood system, and the calming portion really, it may have zero effect, but it's just something that you do in addition that makes you feel like, okay, I'm facilitating or helping the healing process, right? But you're right, like there's pros and cons to that practice. What I would say is I'm not one of those all or none kind of people where it's like we have to eradicate all bad belief, all bad actions, all bad this, all bad that. And I'm also not one of those people that are like, oh, because it works in these situations, let people do it in all situations, right? I live my life in this sort of gray area of, well, here it's not so bad and there it is, right?
I'm happy to let people believe what they want to believe. I'm not going to preach and tell someone that they shouldn't be believing what they want to believe.
Right.
By the same token, I think we should take every single opportunity to correct erroneous beliefs if it comes up. If someone brings it into the open and wants to talk about it, then we should take the opportunity. I would never push my way into I'm a regular visitor to churches and mosques and temples and things.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think I can recall once when I've ever gone in there and started discussing why someone's belief is wrong in any situation. But you can bet your ass that if someone's on the street corner preaching, I'm going to stop every single time to discuss it with them.
Yeah, isn't that interesting how there's like this, it's really hard to tell when to address a specific superstition or bad belief and when to just let it go. And I guess for me, I really believe in the power of psychology, right? And so if that practice, if that specific psychological practice, and I do think it has to be case by case, is bringing someone a benefit, then sure you can explain it to them if you want to, that yeah, it's just a placebo or it's just your brain doing this or that. But I believe in the power of like your psychology changing based on certain practices, right? Whether it's yoga or whether it's meditation or whether it's putting on your left shoe first instead of your right shoe. And so for me, I really do think that there is a place for that sort of like what would you call that? It's like self-hypnosis almost, where you're convincing yourself of this like state of being and then making it happen versus
I feel like I'm arguing with you.
No, go for it.
See, this.
That
Can
is
we
demystify? Fight.
Can we what?
Can we demystify meditation?
Oh yeah, and I don't think
Because
yoga or meditation are in any way mystical. Yeah,
that's something that I'm really a strong advocate of doing. Because as you know, I'm a huge proponent of meditation. I think it's fantastic. But there's nothing fucking mystical about it at all.
Exactly. Yeah.
No.
But that's why I used it as one of my examples, is because you have things that are legitimate. Hey, I'm using this to change my psychology or change my mind state. And then you have these sort of like superstitious things to change your mindset. And my argument is if the results are the same either way, yes, this is the bad or the not correct way of looking at things realistically according to reality, right? Your left shoe versus your right shoe makes no effing difference other than the fact that your brain then gets into a specific mindset.
But I think as well, some of those things, some of the behaviors that people exhibit in that realm are, we don't often choose them either.
Right.
And often it can be compulsive too, like you can't bring yourself to not do things sometimes in a specific way because that's not how you've always done it, or it just feels right to do that because it's been ingrained for so long, or and it's not necessarily even a thing of I believe that this has some mystical power. It's just then a habit and a convulsion and a whatever.
Ooh, that's a really interesting conversation, is the difference between a superstition and a habit, right? So like I, for example, have a habit of locking a door behind me when I shut it in my house. And I have done it where I've accidentally locked the kids in the backyard. And I mean, not like, for hours, but it's like they're knocking on the sliding glass door and it's like, oops, sorry. And I unlock it and let them in. Right. Sometimes I just stare at them and, shrug.
Yeah.
No, but it's like, it's that you're right. That's a habit. I'm not superstitious that if I don't lock that door that a ghost is going to enter the threshold of my home and like haunt me or anything like that, but or that bad luck will befall me, but it's just something I do without even thinking about it. So that's kind of interesting is where those different nuances lie. Like, does the athlete who you observe always putting their left shoe on first or entering a room in a certain way for practice or a game?
Yeah.
Are they doing it because they're superstitious and they think they have to, or are they doing it because their body is just sort of conditioned and used to doing it?
They may start as one and meld into the other or what have you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I guess there's different kinds of superstitions, and so one of them is the whole if I do this, it will result in this kind of action, right? But then there's also like other types of superstitions, right? Like unlucky numbers or dangerous objects or people or something. So what do you guys think?
Stuff like breaking a mirror, you'll have 7 years bad luck. Like, I don't believe that I know anyone who actually gives credence to that in terms of people who do break mirrors will actually get that, but you hear that all the time. That's a thing that people say if someone's 7 years bad luck. But again, that also, and it's not an episode about luck, but luck seems to play a big part in all this. Like, things don't have often a specific sort of outcome, but it gives good luck in something or bad luck in something, when actually I don't reckon luck necessarily exists. You can be in a more advantageous position physically or disadvantageous position, but luck doesn't, like, it's not like there's some universal system of luckiness that sort of you know what I mean, like determines different.
It's similar to like karma, right? Like, it's different in the sense that like it's more arbitrary. But you're right. Like, a lot of superstitions revolve around this good luck, bad luck, good things
The whole
happening,
ladder
bad
thing
things
that I
happening.
mentioned earlier on, it's not that if you walk under a ladder you will die or you will have something falling. It's just that it's bad luck to walk under a ladder. And so then but it's that whole sort of join of dots and patterns thing, isn't it? If someone walked under a ladder knowing the fact that that was bad luck, and then they drop the cup of tea on the way into work or something, that was because they walked under the ladder, and then people attribute things to events which are completely and rationally separate and unrelated.
And Gilliver, isn't that called like confirmation bias?
Positive discrimination.
Positive discrimination. Okay.
That, but it is a form of confirmation bias. Yeah.
Yeah, where you're like, I'm gonna recognize.
It's like if for example you get if Laura, if you call me one day and I say, "Oh, I've just been thinking about you."
Yeah,
I've ignored all the other times I've been thinking about you,
which is all.
And other people.
And every other person you've thought of that hasn't called. No, that's a really good point.
It's just it's positive because you're putting your discrimination in one area. So Yeah,
It's kind of like the idea of when you buy, like, say, a red car, then suddenly you see red cars all over the place where they weren't there before. It's your mind
yeah.
is now attuned to that specific kind of information. So maybe when you do that one specific thing, say before a sports game or before an activity, and you find that you're more successful, maybe you're really only paying attention to those specific aspects that really reinforce that, and you're ignoring other times, like the games that you lost when you did that
Especially
same
because,
thing.
like, if people do those rituals before a game, or they, go against one of the culturally, frequently said things about, like, I'll go back to the ladders thing. It's really easy to attribute blame to those things, or, it's really easy to say, I won the game because I did the ritual. It's really easy to say, I didn't get that job because of the ladder. And
Yeah.
that just backs up what I was saying before. It's really, really easy to sort of prove to yourself that these things work and have, real life consequences.
It's really interesting. And talking about real life thing, I want to touch upon something you've said and something Laura said and bring them together. And Laura, with the discrimination thing, and you, when you were talking about luck a while ago, and that does have real life implications when people are gambling. And
Yeah.
it's it's such a massive industry. So many people get taken in by it, and it's just like it astounds me how many people kind of get taken over by this thing, and for I mean, so many fallacies involved. The sunk cost fallacy being one of the big ones, which is the kind of you've invested so much into something, and despite the fact that you're still losing, you convince yourself to keep going because there
the
will be
universe
some
owes it
reward
to you
at the end
because
of
you've
it.
gone so far.
Yeah,
So you're right that, like, even though that's not maybe a specific superstition, you're talking about those same centers in your brain and the fallacies that they're creating, whether it's a superstition or whether it's gambling. I agree with you. I think they're very similar. Not that I like know for a fact, and I'd love to see what the science is on that, like
yeah,
the way that our
definitely.
brain fires. But but what you're talking about is the way that our brains sort of trick ourselves, right? Like if I do things in a specific way, I'll be more lucky or successful. Or if I gamble this certain number of times, right, I'm gonna hit this much money and I'm gonna be successful. And then your brain wants
There's
to keep.
examples there as well, things like, someone who blows on the dice before throwing them, or, whatever it is, to just give them that
Yeah,
little edge of
I
comfort.
do that all the time when I play board games with my kids, and I do it basically for fun, like as a mockery. But it's funny, like so. We got to
I
go to a
believe you.
commercial break.
I'm just doing it ironically.
I do like they'll be like, okay, roll a like 4, Laura, and I'm like, okay, Amber, blow on the dice, like I'm gonna roll a 4, right? And there's zero actual superstition involved, but it is kind of like a fun sort of mockery. So you just gave me what I think should be our topic when we get back from the commercial break, which is superstitions that we do, but knowing that they're not really that there's really nothing behind them. So yeah, let's go to commercial break, and then when we get back, we'll discuss that.
Okay, so what have we got coming up? Laura, start with you because you're usually busier than everyone else.
Oh dear Lord, I really need to learn how to write my schedule down. Um, I know. Yeah, I'm on. So I know I'm doing the Veterans Day episode of Nonprofits. But I did not project this specific episode out to see when it falls in relation to that. So if it is before the Veterans Day episode, then catch me on that in the future. And if this if this episode airs after the Veterans Day episode, I'm pretty sure that
watch
this will
it.
air before. Yeah, go check it out and
Welcome
watch
to our
it.
regular time
But
travel segment. of the
yes,
show.
because we pre-record these. So yeah, however this falls in the schedule, I'm almost certain that this falls before that episode. But yeah,
Do you know who you're on there with? I'm sure that
Kenneth
you're on with
Leonard's on
Kenny Lenny.
there. Yeah, and then we
Friend of
do
the
have,
show.
yeah, and I'm
Friend
pretty
of the show.
sure Martin's on as well. I gosh, I really wish I could
Oh
remember.
wow,
So
that's
yeah,
going to
but
be
it's gonna
such a good
be
lineup.
super cool. We're gonna get all people who are members of the armed forces, and we're trying to represent different branches. So instead of having like 2 army or whatever, we're trying to have different people of different branches. So we'll see how that turns out in terms of people's availability and stuff, but that is the goal. So it should be really fun.
Awesome. Looking forward to that immensely. I've got nothing coming up because nobody likes me. But I do want to I want to advertise a couple of other people, actually, while I've got the opportunity. I want to give a shout out to Eric and V and the Skeptic Generation, who are doing an amazing job. So a big shout out to them and keep up the good work.
Yes.
And
so much love directed that way.
And I will add their link in our description to give an additional shout out. So if you guys are interested in checking out their stuff, look in the description and I will add a link.
Yeah, Ethan Michael, as always, a great supporter of ours, giving us so many opportunities. Big shout out to Ethan. He works so hard. If I worked half as hard as Ethan did, I might actually have some subscribers to my own channel.
I know, right?
Rather than piggybacking
he and I have a very, very similar energy in terms of like what we bring to people, right? Like we both have that really high energy, kind of funny, goofy, don't take things too seriously. But we also have like that sort of like serious pursuit for I don't know, improvement. But what Ethan has on me is this shrewd ability for like marketing and just he's so on fire. And so where I'm like, oh, I kind of want to do this thing. He's like, yeah, but I'm actually going to do it. So like, I really admire his tenacity and his ability to get out there and just make things happen. So Ethan, shout out to you, bud.
Richard, is there anywhere anyone can find us? I'm not even going to bother asking you if you've got anything to come up. She just goes,
no, I don't have anything. I'm just trying to think. No,
I like when Gil talks about like the sandwiches he's gonna eat or like where he's gonna go next week or what kind of yard work he has. I love it. It's like it brings the real back to our podcast.
Well, it's in a couple of weeks' time, so we'll definitely have episodes released before then. But I'm taking Mrs. Gill for a night away in a few weeks, which is nice. And do you know what's good? She doesn't watch the show at all. So
neither does my wife.
Neither does mine.
Do you know what's interesting as well with you saying that? I took Mrs. G. I took the G dog, as she's known, away for a night a few weeks ago, and it was supposed to be a romantic night away to York with all the lovely old buildings and things, and I just disappeared into a bookshop and came out with a book on the Old Testament scholarship.
Oh no! Did she roll her eyes and go like, "All right"? No.
Richard,
I was supposed to say about stuff.
The Facebook group.
The Facebook group is great, and you can find that as well as all of our podcast links on our Linktree site, which is linktr.ee/Skeptic Hangout. I'd encourage people, especially, to subscribe on Spotify because I get more accurate statistics of that, which is nice to look at. Nice. So,
I like statistics.
I mean, no particular reason, just I get stats. So.
And stats
I'm
make
glad
us
you
happy.
think it's nice to look at because that at least shows us we're doing something right. If it's nice to look at,
there's some numbers on there. Yeah,
you could have easily said, "I look at it and cry."
I mean, I could have 5 viewers and I'd be like, "Yay, 5 people care about what I have to say." So, I don't even care. Numbers are numbers. Okay, so back to the show.
Yeah.
All right, so before the commercial break, we were talking about what different kinds of superstitions we might follow or partake in or whatever that we know are complete bullshit, but we do it anyway for whatever reason. So I've got a few off the top of my head, but I want to hear you guys first.
Gil.
I knew you were going to say that because I asked for advance notice of what we were talking about so I could think about it, and the thinking still hasn't really happened.
Okay, I'll start then. I don't really have. I think the closest thing I have to a superstition, or I wouldn't really call it a superstition, is I always raise a glass on New Year's Eve of whiskey to my great grandmother. That's as close as I think I get to a superstition.
Why her specifically?
I don't know. Because she was a crazy Glaswegian woman who used to dance on tables and sing "I Belong to Glasgow."
I would get along with her.
And she was like this big. She was really, really smart. She died when she was 99. Yeah, she died when she was 99 years old. And she actually, this is not like a story I should tell to Kai, because it's not going to endear her to anyone. It's just going to show what a twat she was.
I love that you people can say twat and it's not considered a bad word. Oh,
she knew that, so she knew someone who went on the Titanic, and she was happy when it sank because she didn't like the person who went on it.
Oh, I like her. So you guys don't do anything fun like pick up pennies because they're lucky or anything like that?
I mean, I can, like my kids always. Sorry, I just drank something that's gone to the back of my throat. My kids can never not throw, a coin in a wishing well or, things like that. But I mean, I just see that as a blatant waste of money. Blatant.
That's why I pull out the pennies.
It's a Yorkshireman. He's a Yorkshireman. If he drops a penny on the floor, it hits him on the back of the head when he bends down to pick it up. Whenever
we're near a fountain or anything, I legitimately am like, are there any like pound coins within reach that I can pick up from here now?
Where are the $10 bills?
Yeah, it's funny. I was trying to think of things like superstitious wise, and I guess I kind of was thinking about lots of different things, but none of them actually fell under the, I guess, subheading of superstition. There are things which I do which are habits, and we talked about habits before, but like, I don't know if any of them ever even were superstitious or whether it's just, I don't know, just part of what I do. Here's the thing. Every time I step out of the house, just in front of our front door, we've got like a slight like raised area with like 9 flagstones in like a grid, like a 3x3 grid. And before I go anywhere, this is going to make me sound like a legitimate, like I need to be sectioned. But whenever I go outside, I always stand with both feet on the middle one and then carry on. And there is no reason why. I don't think it's bad luck or good luck or whatever. It's just something that I found myself doing and now can't stop.
Like it's a habit. Like you enjoy it.
Epitome of superstitious.
No, because there's nothing behind it. Like, oh, if I don't do this, this is going to happen. So that can't be superstitious.
Right? And I must have gone outside without having done that. But whenever I go outside and I'm thinking about it, that's what happens, and I just can't not do it.
So I do something similar, and I always thought it was like an OCD tick. But when I walk over cracks on a sidewalk, I have to do an even number. If I'm like, say I'm walking a distance, right? I have to do it even, and not, this is the first time I'm saying this publicly. This is crazy. I have to do an even number crossing the crack or the line with one foot as with the other foot, right? So if I'm walking a pace where it's always my left foot going over, I will do a little change step and then walk with my right foot over for that same number of steps or about the same until it feels right. Otherwise I get nauseated. Like I get really
Please tell me you do that little military step thing.
I do.
Where you kick
change
your
step.
heel.
Yep, it's a change. Yeah. Marching band, military, same thing. Yeah. Or if I'm jogging, I'll just make my footfalls slightly shorter or longer, depending on what's more comfortable, to where my foot will fall. Then the opposite foot will fall over the crack. And I always assumed, because I know that OCD, there's an actual anxiety there, and sometimes it's tied to if you don't do this, this is going to happen. And I've never had that consequence in my head. I've always just had, oh my God, I'm getting nauseated because my left foot keeps falling over the crack, and now I need my right foot to do it instead. Like, or there's no or else. But
and it is that thing of like very rationally, you understand
I know
there's real world implications.
Nothing's going to happen. Yeah, and there's no reason why a specific foot has to fall over at a specific time or a specific number of times. But so I always sort of attributed it to an OCD tick.
I think we have very similar feelings about both of our examples there. And I think likewise to you, I've never said what I just said out loud before, and it's weird. Admitted it to the world.
Like my husband knows about it, and he thinks it's funny. Like when I first told him about it years and years ago, he was like, I was wondering, because like we'd be walking and I would notice you changing your pace a little bit every once in a while. He goes, I always wondered what that was. And he's known about it now for years. He actually teases me sometimes. But I think he might be the only other human being that knew, except until now. Yeah. Now, the more popular this podcast gets, the more people will know. So people, share this podcast. Let's get as many people out there knowing about our weird OCD tics as possible. But yeah,
do you have anything like that in your life, Gilliver? Did that ring any bells for you?
No.
No.
I'm
just a boring tit.
I'm right. He's like, what is the race in Star Trek that's very logical? Oh dear Lord.
Do you know
Vulcans.
what?
Vulcans. He's like part Vulcan.
My wife actually refers to me as a Vulcan. Because
It could be true.
I really am. Despite having a lot of fun and that a lot of the time, I don't really have a sense of humor. So I'm very logical with most things, and practical. Even when it comes to like things that could cause upheaval, I'm like, oh, don't worry about it. Let's look at things one at a time and practical it out, and we'll deal
Let's
with
not
this.
feel
And then
too
we'll
strong
move
of an
on to
emotion
this, and
until
then we'll no need to get emotional, dear.
Oh, that's actually, so I think I could sometimes use a little bit more of that
I'm
in
not
my
that
life.
patronizing.
Yeah.
I'm not that patronizing. That
Oh no,
was a
he is.
joke.
He just outed himself. Yeah. No, but I in terms of like superstitious things that I do that I know aren't superstitious, I do like a shit ton of them. Like I do catch myself saying bless you to people sometimes just out of habit. And I think that's more of a cultural, like it depends on the situation I'm in. And if I think that they'll appreciate it or not. And it's very
I say bless
impulsive.
you simply on the fact that my best friend, literally, if I don't say it, she'll look at me and just like.
So
like,
you don't
bless
like your
me.
best friend
It's
looking
just
at you.
socially
That makes you very
appropriate thing to say.
uncomfortable. Yeah.
She'll sneeze, and if I don't say bless you, she'll literally turn around to me and go, bless me. And I'm like, all right, bless you.
Bless me, Gilliver.
That goes back to our authority episode. Like you're giving her authority over you that may or may not be necessary or deserved. But no, I don't know. I'm kind of the same way. Like I do it out of habit or social grace or whatever, but a lot of times I don't do it though. So when I do, it's quite arbitrary and it's based on sort of like a feeling. Like I feel like this would be an appropriate time to say it. But I do, like I will pick up change. And I'll tell the kids like, "Hey, here's a penny for good luck," or whatever, and they know that it's not for good luck. A lot of times they're like, "Oh, cool, money," and we do the blow on the dice thing, but nothing where it's like, "Oh, this thing is lucky," or "This thing, if I do this certain thing,"
It's like crossing your fingers, isn't it? Like, oh, I'm hoping real hard. Like,
oh, we do that. I
fingers
do that.
crossed.
Yeah.
Like this.
Yeah,
was
like if
the
someone's
better
like,
outcome than something.
and for those of you not watching the video, I'm gonna do this every freaking episode that you guys do this. Those of you not watching the episode, he's crossing his first two fingers over each other. I do that.
Point out it wasn't me this week. It was
Yes,
Richard.
it was. Yeah, it was Gil this time. I do that a lot where it's like if someone's like, "Oh, I hope we get to hang out tomorrow," I'll be like, "Oh, me too," and I'll cross my fingers. Just completely out of habit. I don't honestly think that if you do that, it's gonna make it any more likely. But I think I do a lot of those things because I have a very like fun, energetic personality that enjoys partaking in certain activities just for the sake of doing it. Like there doesn't
I think
have to
someone
be
a
any more
lucky
to it.
penny as well it just feels like a nice positive thing to do.
Just freaking fun. Yeah.
It's just
like it's just a penny, people. It's cool.
Yeah. Oh, Jill is shaking his head.
Oh, I do the knock on wood thing too. So this whole episode's gonna be about me and all my superstitious activities that I know.
I forgot about that thing. I do that all the time.
Like I will say something that I want to have happen. Yeah, knock
Can I have
on
some
wood.
new co-hosts?
No, but literally, like, I will be stood in a room and I'm like, where on earth is there some wood so I can knock on wood as I'm saying this thing? Yeah, ridiculous.
Yeah, knock on wood. Yeah, and I'll say it out loud as I'm doing it. Like I'll be like, oh yeah, we should like. I really hope that tomorrow we get to hang out or something. Knock on wood, right? And I'll do it. That was me knocking on my not actually wooden desk. It's like particle board or some shit, mostly glue. Yeah, like I don't think that that's going to increase or decrease the chances of whatever it is happening, but I do it anyway. And I get some sort of like a bit of enjoyment or jolty out of it. Like it's almost like I'm making fun of the superstition, but I'm not because nobody's there to
but here's the thing, isn't it? Like, because Gilliver was shaking his head.
Yeah.
And like I kind of understand the shaking of the head because like if I'm still hunting out wood to say touch wood where the weather forecast said tomorrow's supposed to be really sunny, touch wood, like I'm still actively touching wood as a signal that I'm wanting the weather report to be correct,
or you're hoping that your words don't somehow jinx whatever it is that's going to happen.
You know, like when the kids were small, we'd be like, so and so sleeping really well.
Oh,
tonight,
I'm
isn't it?"
knocking on wood.
And then
for it,
like, no,
yeah.
if you don't say it too loud or confidently, because then he will wake up, you know. And it's those little things where like, you know, there's no correlation, and rationally you can think that, but still
You do
I
it
say
anyway.
that and still I do that. So then am I superstitious? Like, I don't reasonably believe that those things have an impact in the world, but I still do them ritually.
Yeah, you're
Um,
partaking in sort of like this cultural, like you said, ritual, but it makes you feel a certain way. Like, especially with the kids going to bed early or whatever, like, oh, the kids are asleep. Shh, don't say that. They'll wake up, you know? Like, it actually makes you feel better or feel good to say that thing, but you know that like it has no bearing on whether or not they're actually going to wake up. And 9 times out of 10, they're going to actually wake up anyway.
Yeah. Because kids. Jill, have you got
I
a
was going to say
bad
because
thing
God
to say
hates
in
sex,
response
but
to
yeah,
things?
that too.
Yeah, I'm going to call Ascalon and Phil and get them back on as my new co-hosts.
Oh, come on.
No. I think it's brilliant that as skeptics, which we all are, you can like look at yourself doing that and know you're doing it without the kind of bullshit attached to it. It brings it back into this thing of habit, I think. All the way through you both talking, then I was in all seriousness, I was thinking like, you know, these are habits, these are things that have been formed, the things that have been repeated.
Yeah.
And
touching wood, if I hadn't grown up in a house where people did that, when, you know, like in that
yeah,
same
and
situation.
kids do it at schools, like it gets perpetuated.
Yeah.
So isn't it kind of the same habit as like when you run into someone you know and like you go through that whole ritual or routine of like, hey, how's it going? Oh, it's good. How are you? Yeah, good. Nice to see you. And you both move your separate ways and you're both like, oh, phew. Right? Like, I didn't know what I was going to say to that person.
We'll have to go out for a drink sometime.
Yes, and that is very similar to the non-superstitious superstition where you're doing it just out of sort of social conditioning. Yeah, that's interesting.
It is interesting. It's very interesting. And what we haven't done, which I'm surprised about so much, is talk about specific superstitions and kind of whether it's. I mean, in my case, I don't know where a lot of them come from, so maybe that's why we've not gone down that route. But I kind of expected us to talk about specific superstitions and kind of
Like
their
where they come
origins
from.
and
I think
how
we
they.
sort of didn't we sort of touch on that a tiny bit though? Like when you talk about like, oh, some superstitions were religious, like the bless you and stuff.
Some are
And
from like a misunderstanding, you know, not understanding germ theory and thinking that are the causes for disease.
yeah.
Like, you know, like.
But I don't know where a lot of them come from. Like the
Yeah.
black cat being unlucky. I think I've heard about it, like sort of when you learn like those gee whiz things, say around like Halloween time or whatever. I've maybe heard before where the black cat superstition comes from, or like walking under a ladder, for example, or breaking a mirror. I don't know where any of those superstitions come from. So it'd be very a boring show if we decided that that's what we wanted to talk about, because we'd all just sit here and like.
If you do know,
Yeah,
put the stuff in the Facebook discussion group.
You know what?
So
I'm gonna write
you
that a
can
little note that like we should.
educate us.
Yeah, we should actually do a prompt on Facebook that says like, hey, what is a superstition that you know the origins of, and what are the origins?
What is the strangest superstition you've come across?
Yeah, that's a good one. I would say when I was Muslim, I was having lunch with some women from Morocco, and one of the ladies, she was an older woman and she didn't speak English, so it was like translated, like what she was saying was translated through the younger woman. And she was doing this sort of like ritual in the kitchen while she was cooking using certain spices, and she said that certain spices are pleasing to certain spirits and not pleasing to other spirits, so you cook with certain spices in order to have like good spirits in the house versus bad spirits, or ancestral spirits versus not, or whatever the case may be. But I found that to be interesting, because to me, I was like, that has nothing to do with Islam. Like, you can't have a belief like that because you're Muslim, right? Me and my very, very closed-minded perspective was like, but that's not a Muslim belief. But I later realized, oh, that's a cultural belief, right?
Yeah.
And so then it made more sense to me after the fact. But that superstition to me, that's prevalent in multiple cultures. You're talking about burning sage to cleanse your house of bad spirits.
Yeah.
Like that's pretty common, but it's bizarre. Like all of Nevada would be spirit free because we have nothing but sage and we burn constantly.
I've heard you're notoriously spiritful in Nevada. Spirits abound. Just
we
everywhere.
have ghost
Street
towns.
corner, yeah.
Haunted houses. Yeah.
I don't have a good answer to your question, Gilliver. Do you have an answer to your own question?
The closest I can think of was prompted by Laura, actually, and it's a religious aspect of and there were a couple that came to mind when she was speaking, and they're both related to Thai culture and Buddhism. And one is that you always burn 3 sticks of incense. And I actually knew a friend of mine's the abbot of a Buddhist monastery, and he's not interested in burning 3 sticks of incense, but it burns 3 sticks of incense because it's a Thai-based monastery. So if he doesn't, he went through a period of not burning 3 sticks of incense, and it got quite an ear rattling from what I can gather from the story he told for not doing so. And the other one is that in thunderstorms, after thunderstorms in Thai culture in Buddhism are caused by devas, which are heavenly spirits, and
like
so
Beyonce
you have to like
Beyonce.
I thought you said
Diva,
Beyonce.
like Beyonce. Yeah.
I thought I misheard her.
Mariah Carey, she's notorious.
You've thrown me completely off.
Oh, so you're talking about thunderstorms.
Yeah. After, I don't know how you appease them, but there's a method of going about appeasing them to kind of stop the thunderstorms. And they were the kind of things that were springing into my mind while Laura was talking about that, especially about the spices appeasing the spirits.
That is really like interesting. Like that brings up a whole nother topic, and we are kind of coming up toward the end of the show. We do still have a few more minutes, but the idea that like so many superstitions have to do with and I didn't even think about this until just now, but like nature and natural events, and how we will say like, oh, to have a good crop this year, for example, people used to have different superstitions around having good crops, or people had different superstitions around like people
still do have superstitions around having crops,
or the weather, or specific natural events. And so it's interesting.
Which a lot of that stemmed from obviously just not understanding meteorology and it's all those
like weather
things.
patterns. Yeah. Or drought. What do they call it? Like how there's like cycles. Like it might be like they call it like the 100-year cycle or 7-year cycles or whatever. So when it hits, people are like, if it's like a 100-year cycle, there might not be anybody alive who still remembers the last time there was a drought, right? And so without understanding that, it could be like, well, we've done something to anger the gods and we need to do something different. I have completely taken that whole section of superstitions for granted because we forget that that's still so prevalent.
And you're just leading me on to another thing now, because what you've just reminded me of is the kind of the flood myths, the Mesopotamian flood myths, which are actually thought that it's possible that they stem from the memory of a real event. And which was some kind of land bridge being, I can't remember the exact event it was. I think it was some kind of land bridge being breached and flooding. A huge flood, and that was what kind of led into the kind of the story of Gilgamesh, the flooding Gilgamesh, which eventually led on to the biblical kind of idea of the flood.
That's really, Laura. I love it. Sorry, I'm getting all excited. Like as you're talking, I'm like, don't interject, shut your mouth. But that's really, really cool because what you're talking about is taking superstition a bit further, right? So first we have these superstitions, and then the superstitions get kind of codified into cultural narrative, and then they become religions, and then they take on like a whole life of their own. So what you're talking about in terms of superstition,
I can't understand why an anthropologist would be excited by that at all.
Not at all, right? I don't even understand. No, honestly, like think about that. Like, okay, so a flood happens and they don't understand why. And then that's where the superstition kicks in. Oh, well, the flood happened because A, B, and C. Like
You have to try and piece it together, don't you?
Right,
What did we do this time that was different from last year?
Yeah, God was unhappy for this or that, or the gods, or whatever, depending on the culture. And then it gets kind of turned into this story. And then that story becomes sort of religious doctrine where it becomes the quote unquote truth. And that to me is absolutely fascinating, because what kind of superstitions today are going to result in tomorrow's myths, and then the next generation's, say, religious doctrine, right? I think that's kind of interesting. Somebody put on our Facebook page that like today's cryptozoology is myth making, like present day myth making. And that's kind of the same idea. Like today's superstitions could also be, tomorrow's religion. It's interesting.
How profound, Laura.
Boom. Boom. Put that on a Snapple cap.
So, Richard, have you thought of anything yet, or shall we move on?
No, let's move on.
It's a good job me and Laura had an interesting conversation from
Well, I'm looking at the time. We're kind of coming up to the end of the show. So
no, we're just getting interested.
I know. I'm so sorry. That's just the way it happens. But yeah, I think I don't have anywhere for superstition to go toward the end of the show. So if you guys have any like closing statements or closing thoughts or questions, it'd be kind of cool to find like one last sort of tidbit to sort of close it out.
One thing
I've got.
Oh, sorry.
Ooh, rock, paper, scissors, guys.
I've got somewhere for superstitions to go, and that's down the toilet. But other than that, go on,
I was
Richard.
just going to say, one thing I really enjoy about superstitions is knowing when there are superstitious people around you and like doing, like putting an umbrella up inside, and people like panic, like literally panic around you. Like, what are you doing? Or putting shoes on a table. I was in the staff room at school a couple of years ago, and there were no teaspoons when I was making my cup of tea because there's never any teaspoons. But there was a knife there, so I stirred, and one of my colleagues just said, "If you stir with a knife, you stir in strife." And I've never forgotten that.
That's awesome.
And that was a superstition that she'd had from like growing up from her like mum and grandmum.
I want to befriend your colleague now.
Oh my God.
But it just, I think it can be a fun thing to play with as well when you're panicking people around you with things that you know are not going to impact the world, but you do
it anyway. Like you purposely go under that ladder.
Okay, challenge for Facebook group.
Okay.
Superstition watch. Between this episode and our next episode, see how many superstitions you spot people making around you and put them in the group.
This was really a really interesting conversation, because actually as we went through, I started off thinking, well, I'm not superstitious at all. But then
come to find out you're highly superstitious.
Like, oh my days, everything I do.
Yeah, how much of our routines are just a matter of like somebody else's superstition, and now it's our habit.
About it, haven't we? Like skeptically thinking about it and the real life thing and whatever, but like that question of like, am I superstitious because I still do these things? And it's interesting.
I think that's really cool. Yeah, I have often questioned, like, just in sort of like my closing statement, and then I'll give it to you guys. I have often questioned like the whole thing that I do at the sidewalk. I was like, did that ever come from the fact that like, when you're a kid and you play that game, like don't step on a crack or you'll break your mother's back? It was always just a game for me. Like I never actually thought it was real, but I'm like, does my OCD
can't it? Like purposely doing that, it can be fun, like to jump around so you're not getting the cracks. It's fun.
Yeah. So sometimes I wonder, I'm like, is that kind of fun superstitious activity in any way connected to my little, like the thing that I do, And I don't know, like, cause I do remember doing that as a child. And then there was like this sort of period in between until I noticed as an adult, oh my God, I do this thing and it really bothers me if I don't. But I have no idea if they're connected or not.
Next time you run, will you try not to do it and see what happens?
I do. I do it on purpose. Yeah, I will do it on purpose. And as soon as I get to the point where I get nauseated. Yeah, it's weird.
And on that note, my closing thought is this, because it's going to be this anyway, and then it just ties in nicely with what Laura just said.
That's your final thought. Sacked.
if don't throw me off. If I forgot what we say. If you catch yourself doing something superstitious, whether it's putting on your left shoe before you go to compete in a sports event or whatever, doing funny little runs over cracks in pavements, or indeed standing on the center flagstone of many flagstones. If you catch yourself doing any of these things, just stop and just take a minute and ask yourself why.
I'll do that as long as I can stop while stood on the center.
As long as he's on that center flagstone.
No, it's because this is part.
That's a good question.
The part of the reason we get into this thing, as we've touched on in the episode, is habit. It's doing these things by habit, and the way to break a habit is to think about why you're doing it and what you're doing. And if you catch yourself doing and whatever superstition you might have for all the listeners out there, if you catch yourself doing it and it is something you do as a habit, whether it's touching wood or whatever, just stop when you do it. And if you catch yourself doing it, just stop and say, yeah, just recognize you're doing it.
Yeah.
Just recognize that you're doing it. That's all you need to do to begin the process of kind of understanding, getting an understanding of a better way of thinking. And that could be the difference between you getting conned out of 100 million bucks and not doing.
Yep, I like it. Yeah, because if you condition yourself in one way to question what you're doing and reflect on it, then it'll apply to the rest of your life. Yeah.
I'm assuming you're using the Americanism of books to mean dollars as opposed to the library you sat in.
Yes.
Oh, you said books? I heard bucks.
Bucks, yeah.
Books.
But
because books.
And on that note, everybody, thank you so much for listening.
Does Richard get a final thought? Have you had the final thought, Richard?
You want a final
put
thought?
umbrellas up inside. It's fun. That's my final thought.
I love it. Okay, this was a fun episode, and I think we went down quite a few rabbit holes. I enjoyed it. So thank you everybody for listening, and I think we have some good challenges now for the Facebook page. So please, everybody, hop over there and participate, because this one I think is particularly exciting. I want to really, really see where this goes.
And relevant, really relevant to everyone.
Super relevant. Yeah. Get us examining like why we do the things we do and if they're even necessary. I'll make a note to put up a story on Facebook too of a story that I heard of someone doing something and not knowing why they did it and then finding out the reason. And it was like, what?
She's so not going to do that.
I'm writing it down right now. So as I write this down, thank you all for watching. And I am Laura.
Richard.
And Richard, and you've been watching Skeptic Hangout. Until next time.
Keep questioning.
Interrogate your superstitions and beliefs.
Love it.
And stay skeptical.
Bye.
Touch wood. Touch wood.
Touch wood. Knock on wood. Knock on wood. Very short and specific point, and I can make it last many sentences. Like I can say very little in a lot of words.
My brain just automatically chooses phraseology towards the end of what I'm saying, though, that doesn't lead to any further discussion. It's just
and you're like, shit, now I gotta find where I can actually grammatically put a period, but my mouth keeps rambling words.